Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Well, today we're going to talk about the Tower of London and how to describe it. Describing things, as you know, is very, very important when it comes to exams because you want to describe the mood of the thing, not just its physical characteristics. So it would be helpful if you had, or if you could Google a picture of the tower, so we can talk about it together. It might be that you've already visited the Tower of London. It is on the tourist route in London. It's one of London's most iconic structures, and it's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. Many of you probably don't know that the Tower of London during the 20th century was actually used as a prison. I don't know why that knowledge isn't available, but when we look at the Tower of London, we often think of kings and queens and medieval battles and stories, but actually, my grandparents told me stories about how during the war it became a prisoner of war camp. They basically converted it into a prison. And then it was the same during the First World War. It was a prison. And the last people to be in there when it was a prison was the Cray twins. They were notorious gangsters who lived in London in the 1950s. They were really a really rough family, and you can find out about them by googling them. The Cray twins or the Cray brothers. They controlled half of London at one point. I can't remember exactly what they did because, of course, I wasn't born, but I did hear the stories about the Cray brothers, the Cray twins. They were gangsters. They owned or they controlled one half of London, and the other half, I think it was a family called Robertson, if I remember correctly. But anyway, back to the tower. They were the last prisoners in the Tower of London, and it was finally closed and converted into a tourist iconic hotspot. I guess I should say an iconic tourist hotspot, not a tourist iconic. Iconic comes fast. Right, so I'm looking at the Tower of London now. And first of all, of course, in the exam, there is absolutely no point just describing what you see. It has four walls, it has towers, because you're very quickly going to run out of adjectives. So you have to be a little bit creative in the description. So let me try to explain how I would describe this. The Tower of London is a standing structure which clearly is designed as some kind of fortress. It looks like a medieval moat with little windows and high towers which seem to be impenetrable. The question is, was it built to keep people out, or was it built to lock people in? Well, I don't have the answer to that, but I can certainly say that by the looks of it, with the very high walls, thin windows, locks, and doors, I would definitely say that it's a very secure looking place. It sits on the banks of the River Thames, which meant there was easy access to bring prisoners here and also easy ways to escape if you had to leave in a hurry. It's mostly famous for what's inside it, of course, and that is the crown jewels. The king's jewels, his ceremonial jewels, are all kept deep in the vaults of the Tower of London, and you can enter to see them. You wouldn't know that by looking at the tower. I mean, there is a British flag flying high above it, which contrasts greatly with the brown brick walls. There's a little moat in the front with turrets, which probably have been built in Victorian times because they don't quite look like they're the same as the older building. One of the strange things about looking at this picture are the guards which are standing outside. We call them beef eaters, and they're proudly guarding the Tower of London, even though the Tower of London probably doesn't need to be guarded anymore. By the looks of this building, like most buildings in the UK, there are CCTV cameras on every corner. So the fact that there's some beef eater, some medieval looking gentleman guarding it, seems to be contrasting greatly with the security cameras which are high above him. All around the top of this building are little turrets, little spaces where you could rest a gun if you were going to shoot your enemy. And again, that takes us back in time to when we used to use weapons and arms. The four corners, which are four towers, would suggest that these were special places to hide people or imprison them. I'm not quite sure what they're used for, but the four are standing like tall soldiers on their own, each peering towards the river. One of them in particular has two windows which look like two eyes guarding the place. There is something which reminds me of Buckingham Palace here. I'm not sure if it's because simply the colour of the brick, or it's just because I know that there's the crown jewels inside. But contrasting those two buildings, I think there would actually be very little difference if we compare or contrast them. I don't see a big difference there. The reason for that is because there's no one at the windows here. Peering in the windows would suggest a darkness. There's no lights inside. The sun is outside, contrasting greatly with these gaps, which are spaces. Buckingham Palace is the same, even though it's much larger with windows. There's not a lot of life there, at least not that we can see by the windows anyway. The Tower of London is also surrounded by green trees and woodland, which is interesting because looking at this picture, you would never dream that it's only a stone throw away from the high skyscraper structures which dominate London's financial skyline. There's lots of pathways here and lots of ways to get to the Tower of London. There's a boat in this picture which shows that people can come by boats. There's also people walking on the roads. There's a big busy road behind here which contrasts greatly with this ancient monument which is standing proud. We mustn't forget that this is one of the oldest structures in the city, and really its history is something which is heavily preserved. As a result, when you pay the entrance fee to go inside, there's lots and lots to learn. The blue sky, which is above it in this picture, is very beautiful, but it's kind of suggesting that London always has nice weather. It's looking like a Mediterranean scene, something like maybe the sun beating down on an old cathedral, or even in the Arab world where the sun shines above many beautiful gold-adorned mosques. This picture would suggest the same. However, we mustn't forget that it's quite unusual to have those kinds of scenes in London. London is known for being a very cold and unforgiving place in the winter. So there we are, a description of a picture of the Tower of London. So this is what you want to do. You want to get inside it. You want to use comparatives. You don't have to be quite as poetic as I've been. I mean, I was talking about the four towers staring into the river. You don't need to be going to such detail, but you could simply say there are four towers standing upright in this beautiful picture or in this beautiful day, like four soldiers, for example. And you could contrast them with the trees next to them. So there's plenty of things to compare and contrast with, but you have to get away from just saying it is brown. There are windows. There are four towers. You have to really bring them to life with other things that come to your mind. There we are. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let's talk again soon. See you. Bye.